I bet you think I'm being facetious or hyperbolic with that title. No, I am being 100% serious. I really do think that Bleach Rebirth of Souls might have killed the future of Bleach games in its entirety by being so damned mediocre, it's hard to even believe. Because first of all, Bleach is part of the big three. Now, yes, I am willing to grant you that it is the least popular of the big three, which is why it's the only one of those shows that got canceled, but it's still part of the big three, which makes it, by default, one of the most iconic anime ever made, and it's barely even gotten the video game treatment. And this is the first game, the first real game, since like the PS3 when Soul Resurrection came out. And I'm looking at a list of all of the Bleach games that exist. It's Soul Resurrection, Blade of Fate for the DS, Heat the Soul for the PSP, Brave Souls, which is a mobile gacha game, and Rebirth of Souls. Bleach is 21 years old here in the US. That's abysmal. And I know what you're thinking. Well, Bleach was off the air for over a decade. What do you expect? Well, let's look at a franchise like Dragon Ball, which helped us get to where Bleach is in the first place. Dragon Ball GT ended in 1997, and Dragon Ball did not have its full-scale return until the Dragon Ball Z Battle of Gods movie released in 2013. Well, let's take a look at the games that came out during that 16-year hiatus, why don't we? How about Legacy of Goku 1, 2, and 3, Budokai, Taiketsu, Supersonic Warriors, Sagas, Budokai Tenkaichi, Super Dragon Ball Z, Burst Limit, Revenge of King Piccolo, Raging Blast, and Raging Blast 2, Tenkaichi Tag Team, Ultimate Butoden, Connect, Battle of Z. Interesting how that happens, huh? It looks like a show doesn't have to be still on the air in order to get content like that. Now, I'm not saying that Bleach and Dragon Ball are on the same level, but I think that Bleach is maybe 1/3 the relevance of something like Dragon Ball Z specifically. So I don't understand why we couldn't have gotten at least one game during the PS4. But that's neither here nor there. If you, like me, are a delusional Bleach fan, why don't you leave a like, tell me who your favorite captain is, or your favorite Espada, and subscribe while you're down there. Anyway, I want to talk about why I think Bleach Rebirth of Souls has killed the potential of getting any more or any better Bleach games. Now, the gameplay that you're watching right now is mine. I did hop on yesterday to record some gameplay to kind of exemplify what I'm talking about. It's my first time playing the game really since it launched back last year, and I didn't remember exactly how to play, so I kind of just defaulted to my old rinse and repeat technique, which is kind of what I want to talk about when it comes to the actual gameplay of the game. It's very simplistic, yet deceptively complex at the same time. You may see on the screen that, like, we've got numbers by our health bar, because for some reason, this game has evolved beyond the concept of just running your health bar down until it's empty, and then you lose the fight. Maybe even doing so twice, like in a game like Injustice, you know. Typically, health bar empty means death. But in this game, things work a little differently. There's like a section towards the bottom of the health bar where your health turns red, and if you get hit with the end of a combo, you can do a super move, and you take off some kanpaku, or stock, basically. But if you completely deplete your opponent's health bar and then you hit them with that same move, you get rid of more kanpaku. So it's pretty much you just have lives. The specific number doesn't matter, because typically you're going to kill your opponent in 2 or 3 of these moves, depending on if you're patient enough to deplete the entire health bar before you do the key cone move, or if you're just going to do it as soon as it's available to do. And it's really just as simple as that. And the way that the combat works, you don't have free-form combos like you would in a game like Dragon Ball FighterZ, or even something like Naruto Storm. And I know what you're thinking, how could you compare this to a traditional arena fighter like Storm, or a traditional 2D fighting game like FighterZ? it's something else entirely. And you'd be right about that. It is effectively the worst of both worlds. It wants to be both of these things. There's light and medium and heavy attacks like it's a true fighting game. There's proper blocking. You can be, you know, you can guard break. You can have back turn like it's a 3D fighting game. There's full movement like it's an arena fighter. There's all sorts of weird intricacies that show that this game wants to walk a line without really committing to either concept. But it's just, we're looking at just such a needlessly convoluted gameplay and damage and health system. We're also looking at something that's so nebulized, similarly to Storm, because I would argue that when you're playing a game like Storm, or something like Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, the character that you're playing doesn't really impact the flow of gameplay too much, because in a game like Bleach Rebirth of Souls, 90% of the characters have swords. So you don't have a whole lot of range with any characters unless you use your Bankai or your Resurrection. If you transform, you go into your Awakening, depending on what character you have. Sometimes they'll get more range, sometimes they'll have a status effect, whatever the case may be. And that's something that applies more to ranked or to online than it does to story mode, because you don't really play as too many characters in the story mode, but I'll get to story mode in a second. But you have a very samey feeling gameplay system, like in Storm, where I would hazard to say that the gameplay is going to feel very similar from character to character unless you're using a puppet master like Kankuro, Chio, or Sasori. That's neither here nor there, though. I do want to talk about what the online experience is like a little bit, at least at the time that the game came out, because for me, I only ever got 2 or 3 matches the whole time, like that whole first week that the game was out. I went through that whole story to unlock Dangai Ichigo because, in my mind, I'm going to use Grimmjow, Byakuya, and Dangai Ichigo. Those are the 3 characters that I really want to use. Maybe I'll get around to some Kisuke, maybe some Bankai Ichigo if I feel like it. But it just took so long to get matches sometimes. I'd sit in matchmaking for like an hour. And this is when the game first came out. Theoretically, this is when the game's got the most players that it'll ever have. So I can't even imagine what it's like now. But I found it to be strangely balanced because I ran into somebody playing Uryu, the only Quincy in the game. And Quincy's shoot arrows, or at least Uryu does. So I couldn't approach, because the rinse and repeat gameplay style that I'd figured out for, you know, main fights in the story is just close the distance with a grab, spam triangle until you knock your opponent away, press X to close the gap again if you have enough meter for that, and then press square over and over again until the combo is over. Rinse and repeat. That's pretty much the only consistent way that I could start a combo, was starting it with a grab. But when you do that, you dash directly at your opponent. And it's hard to do that when you're getting zoned out. Or, I also fought Akaname Tosen, whose Bankai in the show is he creates a dome of sensory deprivation. You can't see or hear anything. In a multiplayer competitive setting, it sucks when you can't see your opponent. This is something that I did not like about Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, how the Infinity Stones affected the battle. And if your opponent had the Space Stone, they could just put you in a box where you couldn't do anything to protect yourself. You would just get beat up. When a mechanic in your game just gives one player such an obvious and overwhelming advantage over the other, it's just shocking how quickly the game stops being fun. This is a game with a ranked mode. They want tournaments. They want people to play this game competitively and take it seriously. And that's what we're looking at. Also, you may have seen by now that the cutscenes in this game just leave a lot to be desired. Obviously, this game is not made by CyberConnect 2, and I'm not going to say that every game needs to be made by CyberConnect 2 because they can only do so much. And I barely even liked Kakarot. But one thing that I will give Kakarot is that when they went all in on the cutscenes, they blew your mind because CyberConnect 2 was good at that sort of thing. They're good at making big, flashy finishers that, you know, stick in your memory when you're done watching them. Bleach Rebirth of Souls doesn't have that. The presentation of the story is probably one of the worst I've ever seen in an anime game. Please excuse that voice crack. It's truly astonishing. One thing that you may notice is that I've, brought Aizen's health all the way down and done a Keycon move on him, but his health, like, his number of stocks didn't change, so I thought the fight was bugged. It's strange for the one thing that's consistent about how your combat system works to just suddenly change in the last boss fight, but that's what they wanted to go with, I guess. I thought my game was bugged. We're also skipping over things in cutscenes, like Aizen's face peeling back and Ichigo turning into Zangetsu. Or not Zangetsu, turning into Getsuga to use Mugetsu. We're skipping over big things in the finale. Big things that should be rendered in cutscenes, but it's like, oh, the screen just turns white. And then when it comes back, the thing has already happened. Kakarot did do this, like with Buff Trunks, for example, or they completely skipped over things like Super Vegeta, for example. But, like I said, when they really went in, they went in. Bleach doesn't have any moments like that. Not when Ichigo saved Rukia at the Sokyoku. Not when Ukiura killed Ichigo in the Hueco Mundo. None of the big moments that you would expect to get the proper attention and treatment that they deserve for a show as big as Bleach, for this being the first real Bleach game in almost 20 years, for this being a $60 Bleach game. It just gives you none of what you want in that avenue. And it's really, really upsetting. Another thing that's upsetting is that you have to play through damn near every fight that happens in Bleach. You're fighting random hollows from the very beginning of the show during the Substitute Soul Reaper arc. I don't want to do that. I don't want to fight Jidanbo. I don't want to fight, what's his name, Garpy? Grip? I don't care. I don't want to fight Grand Fisher. I don't want to fight Cyalopero. I don't want to fight that one guy that Chad fights in Hueco Mundo. It's just like, why is every fight... I'm so sorry. Why is every fight that happens in Bleach something I have to play? And it really drags when you get to the fake Karakura Town arc, because as you may remember, there's a lot of fights in that arc. It's kind of one of the weak points of that arc, because there are so many fights that you don't remember. Oh, but you gotta play them. Oh, but you gotta play them. And to the game's credit, this is where you'll play as the most characters, but like... Imagine if when you were playing, Storm 3/Storm 4, if you had to do every fight that happened. If you had to, like, fight Kinkaku and Ginkaku, how would you feel about that? Or if you had to... I don't know, what's a good example? If you had to do the Naruto versus Darui and that one girl brief skirmish. Or if you had to do... I don't know. I mean, you get the point that I'm trying to make, right? Like, during the war, if you had to do the Chozo versus Geromazo fight, or if you had to do Konohamaru versus Pain in Storm 2, like, if you had to do every single fight that happens, you'd be like, okay, this is a battle shonen. There's a lot of fights. I'm not gonna care about every single fight. Could you imagine if you were playing Dragon Ball Z Kakarot, and you had to do, like... Actually, that's a bad example, because you do have to do every fight that happens in Dragon Ball Z in that game. But even then, it gets to a point, like, do you remember fighting Kui on Namek in Dragon Ball Z Kakarot? Probably not. Do you remember fighting Yakon and Pui Pui? Probably not. It just feels like it's wasting your time in a game that's already way too long, and is making you watch these lame-ass, low-budget cutscenes. It's like, why is there no budget for the Bleach game? Now, this isn't a review of the game, I've already done one of those. But it's just, the game came out almost a year ago, and it just frustrates me to no end what we got. And on the topic of the story, we're going to wrap up the whole presentation of the plot and talk about the elephant in the room. There's an arc missing from this game. The Lost Agent arc, also known as the Fullbring arc of the Bleach story, takes place after the battle for Karakura Town and Aizen is defeated and Ichigo sacrifices his powers. I think that that's a perfectly fine place to end Bleach, but Kubo and Shonen Jump disagreed, so Bleach continued, and we have to give Ichigo his powers back, and there's a whole new power system, and the stereotype of Ichigo having every power type in the entire show continues to be true. But I understand leaving this arc out of the game for two reasons. One, it's highly controversial, very divisive. Many Bleach fans, myself included, are not fans of this arc. There are plenty who are, but it's not a popular arc compared to Soul Society, Wako Mundo, Battle for Karakura Town. It's just not among those ranks. Two, like I said, Ichigo loses his powers in the previous arc. He's just a regular guy for like half of this arc. And this arc isn't so much about the fights, it's about the psychological thriller aspect of it. It's kind of a bit of a horror story. And it's about Ichigo discovering himself. It wouldn't make for very good gameplay, because Ichigo can't fight for a good portion of the arc. And they'd have to make new models for the characters, because there's a time skip before that arc, and they probably didn't have the money for that. But the problem with completely ignoring the Fullbring arc and just ending the game after Karakura Town is there's an arc that's airing right now. Well, not right now, but like that has been airing for the last couple years. The final arc of the manga, the 1,000-Year Blood War. People might want to play that arc. You've got skins from that arc in the game for the characters that are in that arc. Ichigo's got one. Byakuya's got one. But the art style of Bleach has changed by the time you get to that arc. So what are we going to do about the game? But also, Ichigo's older. You know? So you would simply have to make him a new model. And you have to explain why his Bankai looks different. Why his sword in general looks different. Why he's got a different outfit. Why he's even got his powers back. It's difficult to just have him pop back up, because you'd have to either just recap the Fullbring arc or find a way to make this thing work in the gameplay. But still, either one of those things would be preferable to just acting like the story ends after Aizen is defeated. Because Aizen even comes back. It's not like he's gone forever after you defeat him at the end of the Soul Society, at the end of the Karakura Town arc. So what do we gain from acting like it's just over? I don't know. Anime games as a whole have been very tumultuous these last few years. Hinokami Chronicles, Cursed Clash, Nen Impact, All's Justice. I mean, really the whole Justice trilogy. Jump Force, obviously, One Piece Odyssey, the Fairy Tail game that came out a couple years ago. Like, anime games are much more miss than hit. But this is Bleach. This is Bleach. And not only is it Bleach, it's the first real Bleach game of this scale. This should have been our Storm 4. This should have been our Xenoverse 2. I would have even taken a Xenoverse 2. You know? And instead we have a game that's a complete mess. You can tell Bandai didn't want to spend any money on it. So in turn, they didn't make any money off of it. And they're releasing DLC characters. I'm like, I'm sorry, do people play this game still? It doesn't seem like it. I'm actually curious. I'm gonna look at Steam charts real quick. There's 100 people playing Bleach Rebirth of Souls right now. Dude. I don't know. I hate Bandai Namco, and I have for a long time. I hated Bandai before they merged with Namco. And I think it's the worst thing that ever happened to Namco. And now we're seeing it. You know, the greed has infected everything. And I mean, it got to my favorite anime. You know, I don't know what to do with the fact that this is the last Bleach game that's ever gonna get made, at least on this scale. I'm heartbroken. I'm heartbroken. If you're like me, and you really wanted this game to be like the next big thing for Bleach, and you're crestfallen too, let me know in the comments. and we can cry together. I've got a lot more videos to record though. I probably shouldn't say that. I don't want you guys to think that I like don't put effort into each video and that I just kind of like record them in bulk, but I do. I do, because I have a full-time job. I have to record them in bulk. I have to take a day where I have time and just bang out some recordings. Anyway, like I said, who's your favorite Bleach character? I like Byakuya. I like Byakuya quite a lot. He's got my favorite Bankai. Anyway, I'll see you later.